Hello, everyone, and welcome to the post-meeting recording of our very first instructional design Lunch and Learn. My name is Dr. James McKenna, and I have the pleasure of being the coordinator of inclusive design. And why is this a post-meeting recording? Well, we want people to be comfortable asking questions and offering ideas during the live sessions, so we don't record them. Later, when we get to the question and answer section, we'll share some of the topics that came up during the session without revealing the individual participants. Helping me out on the original session was Thomas Amia, a distance learning resources specialist here in curriculum and instruction, and he's also the host of our next session on September 10th, Webcam Wizardry. We have two rules for these sessions. The first is that you should make sure you are muted unless it's your time to talk. I think we're all pretty familiar with this rule, especially what happens when people forget and then you hear all kinds of distracting noises. The second rule we have is the Vegas rule. What happens in Lunch and Learn stays in Lunch and Learn. We have to be able to talk together, ask questions, venture ideas that we're not 100% sure of, and to do that, we have to feel safe. So that's why we don't record the live sessions. We do these post-meeting recordings. After the sessions are done, I incorporate the feedback into these later recordings and also incorporate questions that come up. All these recordings get posted on this Padlet. No doubt you found it as you have found this recording. So why the Lunch and Learns? Well, in my time here in Ed Services, I've been to a lot of trainings to learn what I'm supposed to pass on to our stakeholders. I've also been given pretty clear guidance as to why that learning is important. However, we don't do a lot of professional learning on, well, creating and delivering professional learning. We also don't really have a community of practice around the art and science of improving adult performance. So I've started this little club, and I'm glad you've joined, at least for this session. So today we're going to talk about slide design. We'll start with some of the common challenges and missteps in slide design and the potential negative effects on our audience. Then we'll look at two guiding principles that drive better slide design. Finally, we'll lay down some rules and strategies for putting those principles into action. And before you go, we'll do some Q&A, direct you to resources, and ask you to complete a very short feedback form. With that, let's get started with our first Lunch and Learn, slide design. Has this ever happened to you? Now, during the live session, we took a poll, and it was a unanimous yes, that we have all experienced PowerPoint poisoning in one form or another. The causes that people suggested included too many slides, too much content on individual slides, people reading slides to the audience, things like that. So there are a lot of things that can make for a bad presentation. Some of them have to do with the platform, the presenter, the length, the context, etc. The two biggest causes that are related to the actual design of the slides are redundancy and clutter. So to illustrate redundancy, let me give you an example of what that looks like. Let's pretend I'm a presenter using this slide and you are my audience. Now this is taken from an actual presentation, but not one from LACO. To receive funding under the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, a local educational agency, or LEA, must have a plan approved by the state educational agency on file with the state. Within California, LEAs that apply for ESSA funds are required to complete the Local Control and Accountability Plan, or LCAP, the LCAP Federal Addendum Template, the Addendum, and the Consolidated Application, or CONAP. The LCAP in conjunction with the addendum and the CONAP serve to meet the requirements of the ESSA LEA plan. So what's the problem here? Well, if you're like my live audience, you cued on the fact that I read this whole slide to you. The problem is it's very likely that I read that passage to you at a speed that was different from the speed at which you read with your eyes. The audio and video channels into your brain were out of sync, and that's a problem. It's kind of like when you watch a movie and the sound and the visuals are just a little bit off and you're trying to watch somebody speak. It's disconcerting. Let's see why this is a problem. We have two primary channels into working memory. Vision is the biggest, followed by auditory, which is a distant second. Now, in a learning experience like this one, your brain is getting over 80% of its information from your eyes and about 11% from your ears. And we want to maximize that bandwidth, but we can't do that if these channels are out of sync. If your brain is having a hard time reconciling what it's seeing with what it's hearing, it has to work harder and gets distracted. So we don't want these channels fighting each other. We want them providing complementary information. We want visuals that align with and even expand upon what's being said, and audio that helps us better understand what we're seeing. What's up with this slide? We've got some visuals, some verbiage. What's wrong? It's pretty cluttered, isn't it? The font blends into the background. A lot of writing in front of the mountains, which if you read the text, seems to be the intended focus of the slide. There's too much going on, which leads to a wandering eye gaze. Like you start off, oh, what's the title of this? And then pretty soon, because we're people, we end up looking over here at the face because that's how we're wired. Then we might try to look at the message, but the words are hard to read. So we scan around for other things. Look, it's a logo. Look, there's another one. So we can visually track 6 objects. After that, we shift around. And that's why it's very important to guide the gaze to the important information. However, those 6 objects better have a point. Otherwise, they're just clutter. So at this point during the live session, I posed another poll question. So what do you think the impact of all this redundancy and clutter can have on our audience? And the options were all negative. So people get upset, they get overwhelmed, they're confused, they're distracted, all those things. And now, none of those outcomes are good. And when people make slides like this, they're not trying to achieve those. They're trying to make a great presentation, but they don't know how. They've probably seen a lot of other slides like this and thought, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. So let's look at an alternative to this slide. What if I just showed the mountains and then read the passage, "Isn't it fantastic that you can make whole mountains in just minutes? This is your world. You decide what goes in it." Isn't that more effective? I mean, my bad Bob Ross impression aside, it's better. So let's look at what makes this different. So we remove Bob. I miss his smiling face too, but that wasn't the point. We remove the text, but not the message. We're just reading it instead. And we've gotten rid of those logos. Now, some people really like having their logos on every slide because they think that will make people remember them. Makes sense, right? Repeat exposure builds familiarity. Here's the thing. Science disagrees with that line of thinking. Let's play a game. Stare at the plus symbol in the middle of this gray square. Lock your gaze there and let's see what happens. What's going on? Do you maybe see a rotating green ball? Or some of the purple balls starting to disappear? Maybe a bunch of them are disappearing? Now, only one purple blob is disappearing at a time, and there is no green on this slide. All those other things are happening in your brain. This is called Troxler's fading. The more images remain static and in the periphery, your brain stops paying attention to them. So that logo you're putting on every slide, people stop seeing it after a few slides. Instead of making sure people remember it, you're actually teaching them to forget it. To achieve a polished presentation, there are 2 foundational principles that we need to follow. They're like twin North Stars guiding our journey. The first one is simplicity. Great designs are not measured by how much is there, but by how little could be taken away and still be great. As Einstein said, everything should be done as simple as possible, but not simpler. Simplicity is not the enemy of detail either. It's just if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. The second one is preparation. The details matter, even if you can communicate them simply. You can't get to that simple elegance if you don't put in the time to get the details right. Da Vinci said that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So, how do we achieve this simplicity in preparation? Let's look at some rules and strategies. Rule 1. Use images. If pictures tell 1,000 words, a great visual is going to be a great partner to your spoken message. Steve Jobs was an outstanding presenter, and he used almost entirely images on his slides. To make those visuals the most effective, let's look at some key concepts. Let's look at this side. We've got a slick-looking graphic from one of the Microsoft templates. Those must be great because they come with the program, right? What do we think about this slide? Well, first, we've got some redundancy. We have a title for the slide that's the same as the title for the chart. We don't need to say the same thing twice visually. Now, why would someone do that? Well, for one, maybe the chart is small and we want people to know what the title is, so we put it in big words. That leads to the second point. Why is the chart so small? Now, I did the math on this. We are using less than 1/3 of the available visual real estate to communicate the whole point of the slide. The key takeaway for this is no wasted space. Don't waste 20, 30, 50, 70% of your visual real estate on things that don't add and could even distract from the message. Now, when we use visuals, we want to use quality images in normal proportions. Look at the difference between the left and right images. The left looks shabby. The right is polished. Also, don't squish or stretch your images in ways that distort their shape. Learn to crop and resize to make your images work for your message. A great visual guide is the rule of thirds. This picture is divided vertically and horizontally into thirds, and then the image aligns with these guides. You can use these guides for placing images, text. I've placed a rule of thirds template in the Padlet as well as a link to learn more about it. Again, you'll see that Padlet link at the end of this session. Okay, those are some key points about visuals. But what about using words? Let's see what we can do to get our message out without being redundant or cluttered. We'll start by getting some advice from a person who's made a living by getting the most out of words. This is where I polled the audience and asked if anybody knew who this gentleman was. No one did. He's Seth Godin. He's a renowned expert in marketing and communication. He's also a very successful author with several best-selling books and a substantial stockpile of blogs. His rule for presentations is this: 6 words. He was quoted as saying, no more than 6 words on a slide, ever. There is no presentation so complex that this rule needs to be broken. Now, we can debate whether 7 or 8 words are ever appropriate, but the message is the same. Keep it simple. This is a person who loves to write and is begging us not to write too much in our presentations. He's also quoted as saying, the only reason to give a presentation is to cause change to happen. So we need a point to our presentation and we have to stick to it, getting rid of any dead weight, whether that is content, imagery, effects, what have you. So to keep things simple, we need to be clear about who the slides are for and what their purpose should be. Here I polled people as to who slides are for, the presenter, the audience, or people who missed the presentation. This is the answer. Slides are for your audience. They're not meant to be your visual notes. That's where preparation comes in. If they're your cues, then you need more preparation. Slides are also not handouts. If you think your audience needs lots of written information, make a companion handout. If you think they need note-taking support, make them guided notes. So how do we know if we've achieved this simplicity? A good test of your presentation simplicity is to take the slide deck and give them to a colleague, preferably one who knows as much or little about the topic as your target audience. Now, if they can make sense of your slides without you, your slides have too much information on them. Slides are not there to make you obsolete. Let's remember that redundancy. If they could just read the slides, then they'll wonder what they need you for. And then they'll wonder why they needed to be present at this place and time instead of just reading the slides at their own pace and scheduling. If we're not prepared, they'll wonder if we didn't respect them enough to rehearse. All that indignation, righteous or not, is a distraction. Another key to achieving simplicity is chunking your information. Organize the information so people can follow without getting overwhelmed. Remember, we can track 6 things, not 16 or 60. So let's try this out. Let's pretend we're presenting our new pizza restaurant and we want our audience to know about the variety and quality of our ingredients. Here's a list of all the things they could have on the pizza. This is not effective. So let's take it one step. Here we've arranged all the information into logical groups. A little easier, it's still a lot. Your eyes are probably darting around the 4 lists, seeing some of the components before moving on to another section. Now let's remember the purpose. We're telling our audience about our ingredients. We're not providing them a menu. So we could use something like this. Talk about the different cheeses, herbs, etc. I threw in a little color coding. Not bad, but still, we could do better. What if we just showed this and then talked about the various high quality cheeses that we use? Then move to a similar slide about the herbs, then the meats, then the veggies. Now our audience is interested instead of overwhelmed. They want pizza instead of escape. Now, as our work is not just presentation, but often workshop facilitation, I've offered a few occasions where a bunch of text would be permissible. The first is if we're setting up an activity and we need them to have instructions to reference as they do the activity. Now, in a webinar, you could plug the instructions in the chat instead, especially if you're doing breakout groups. But if you're doing an in-person workshop or just a whole group on a web meeting, you could use the instructions. Those instructions still should be simple. If there are lots of steps, make a handout. Then have the slideshow show them where to get the handout. Now, what if the point was to examine some text? We need an example. So if the text is the point, don't read it to them. Just let them read it. Now, if you're guiding examination of a document or handout, then you could have that up. You're not asking them to read it off the slide. You're just using it as a visual aid to guide them to the pertinent part of the document. Finally, what if there was a great quote or a passage you wanted them to read and then discuss? Certainly you could put that passage up, but again, don't read it aloud, okay? If we have people with visual challenges, there are other accessibility supports that we can use instead of just reading aloud to people. So, what have we learned today? We learned that redundancy impedes learning and has a negative impact on our audience. We learned that clutter confuses the message and can distract or even overwhelm the audience. We learned that the keys to good slide design are simplicity and preparation. And finally, we learned that we can achieve those through using high quality, relevant images, by eliminating waste on our slides, and by reducing the number of words on our slides as much as we can. So I've created a Padlet for you. Here's a snapshot of it. The Padlet link is being dropped into the chat. Well, that's what I did during the live session. We dropped it in the chat. You obviously found the Padlet if you're here. Here's the link. In case you got this video by other means, you can find the Padlet. The feedback is a gift. So please take a minute, and even if you're just watching this recording, take a minute and complete this feedback form. This is the link. We put it in the chat during the live session as well, and we gave people time to fill that out. So if you get a chance, please fill that out and give us some feedback. Here we did Q&A. Largely the questions were more comments around how people were reflecting on their own practice and thinking about how they wanted to work on their slides. Also enjoying the fact that we're having these conversations. And then honestly, a lot of the conversations turn towards the topic of Articulate 360, as some people thought that's what the Lunch and Learn series was for. But the Lunch and Learn series is open to anybody, whereas some of the supports around Articulate 360 are reserved for the folks in Ed Services that have those accounts, at least for now. So if you're seeing this before September 10th, I hope you'll register and join us on September 10th for Webcam Wizardry, where Thomas Amia is going to teach us how to look good on camera, even if we're working from home. Then we're going to shift on the 17th. We'll shift from the specific tips and tools and move to some bigger picture concepts. So this session is titled, What's Your Problem? And it'll focus on defining a problem of practice and backward mapping from that problem all the way to the initial criteria for solving it. And finally, in our last session of the month, we tackle how adults learn. We all know that kids are not small adults, but what happens when our training treats adults like small children? We'll explore the importance of honoring the adults as learners. That concludes our first Lunch and Learn here at LACO. It was awfully fun in person, and it's been nice to provide this follow-up for folks. I hope you find these helpful. You can always leave some comments, send me an email, McKenna_James@laco.edu, and I'll see you next time.